Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider podcast, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. My name is Perryn Keys. I'm the executive sports editor. I'm joined today by Wilson Alexander. He's our lead LSU football beat reporter. And by Scott Rabalais. He's our venerable longtime columnist. He's been covering LSU football for 32 years. There's no truth to the rumor, though, that he was actually there in 1894 when LSU played Ole Miss for the first time. So that's a vicious rumor. I won't stand for it. Gentlemen, welcome in.
We took the riverboat to that game. It took a while, but we got there.
It was 2 days, and somebody died of scurvy. So, gentlemen, LSU's coming off of a 34-31 win over Arkansas in Tiger Stadium. Came out of the gate a little slow in the first quarter, and offense caught fire, the last three quarters, as they are often want to do. The defense struggled a good bit, and now they're going up to Ole Miss, to Oxford. They opened up as a 1.5-point favorite. It's now 2.5 points. Plenty to get into here, but first we'll take care of a little bit of business. Obviously, if you're tuning in, you know that The Advocate's always been the #1 destination for LSU football coverage, and this podcast is just another way for us to bring that coverage to you. So by all means, tell a loved one, tell a friend. You can find the LSU Sports Insider podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever finer podcasts are found. And by all means, if you haven't subscribed to The Advocate, please do so. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. That's theadvocate.com/subscribe. And by all means, get our newsletter delivered straight to your inbox. You get all the latest headlines and all the latest news and the great coverage from these guys straight to your phone, straight to your desktop, straight to your inbox. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. That's theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. So, gentlemen, a lot to get into here. LSU looks like a well-oiled machine on offense, as we say, for certainly the better part of the game. The defense is still very much a work in progress, and I think that's probably where we ought to start off. We'll get into the big picture view of the defense in a bit, but let's talk about some personnel on that side of the ball. Specifically, Omar Speights. He missed the last 2 games with a hip flexor injury. He's the Oregon State transfer who started off as a starter alongside Harold Perkins in the Florida State game, played the first 2 games as a starter, and then he went out with the injury. And then LSU finds himself with a problem. He's supposed to come back. He's probable for this game, listed as probable, and he is supposed to come back. That presents a problem, but it's a good problem to have because in his place, LSU sort of found a playmaker in freshman Whit Weeks. So that leads to the first question, which is, what do they do? How does Omar Speights fit into this linebacking group? What do they do? Do they rotate players in and out with Harold Perkins and with Greg Penn, who's obviously going to stay on the field? Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to probably be the most fascinating thing to see in this game. Like right from this jump is, okay, what is LSU doing in terms of its rotation? It's a good problem to have, and now you have some depth because linebacker coming in, especially before they got Omar out of the portal, was a major offseason question. Are they going to have the guys there who they need? They got Omar to address that, and Omar had 8 tackles in the opener against Florida State, then had 1 against Grambling before he went out, and we haven't really seen what he can really do. I don't think, because in that opener against Florida State, there was, especially in the second half, defensive issues across the ball. LSU's defense has changed fundamentally since then, now running more of a 4-3-4 than a 4-2-5. And so we haven't seen Omar in that kind of scheme. And so we don't know exactly what to expect out of that scheme. And so, there's been a lot of buzz with Weeks, of course, because of the way he's played. He had 9 tackles against Arkansas. He really flashed against Mississippi State. He said himself, we talked to him the other night, Rab, and I did along with the rest of the press corps for the first time. He's this enthusiastic freshman who's just like, it's infectious. It's like, it makes you just want to go play.
He's sunshine. He makes you want to call him sunshine.
Exactly. Sunshine from Remember the Titans is definitely it. And but he said himself, he's still having to turn to Greg Penn during plays or his older brother when they've been on the field together and be like, wait, what am I doing? And then once he knows, he's able to just go and do it because he's super athletic. But with him on the field and certainly somebody who they need to keep getting reps, because that's not only is he a good player, but he's only going to get better as long as he gets playing time. That they've got to find a way to kind of figure out their rotation. I'll be interested to hear. I'm sure we're doing this Thursday morning. Brian Kelly talks Thursday evening, and we'll certainly maybe get more of an answer from him on what they're going to do there. But it's going to be fascinating because Brian Kelly has said that Penn is someone they want to keep on the field. He's been very steadying for them, had a career high 12 tackles against Arkansas. And so there might be more of a rotation between Spates and Weeks.
Weeks with 21 tackles so far this season. And Greg Penn, Brian Kelly, as you said, you mentioned that Greg Penn, they're really leaning on him now. Basically, they feel like he's going to be the guy, sort of inside, that is going to stay there on the field. Rab, do you think that they've sort of figured out what they need to be doing with Harold Perkins, sort of moving him outside, and that's obviously where he feels most comfortable.
Yeah, to start the season, obviously they had him inside, and he was like, as I heard Marlon Favorite, a former LSU player, say, he was like robotic in the Florida State game. He's such an instinctive player. That's what we saw last year. See ball, get ball. I mean, it's kind of simplistic, but he has the speed and the talent to go after the ball carrier, the quarterback, or whatever, and disrupt plays. And he didn't do that. And it seemed like a political decision to put him at middle linebacker. Like, maybe this is what Perkins and his family want because it's best for his NFL.
They want him to be a complete linebacker.
Future. Yeah. And it just wasn't his natural position. So they've got him more in his natural position, aided by the fact that you have Penn and Weeks now, able to handle the middle linebacker spots, the inside linebacker spots better. And he's been more disruptive. Still not, I don't know, Wilson can express his opinion, still not as great so far this season in terms of disrupting plays as we saw last year, but he did have a sack. And against K.J. Jefferson, 252-pound quarterback, that's an achievement. He did have a sack in this last game. So it's getting better, but I certainly don't think he's played anywhere close yet to an All-American level that he was predicted to going into the season.
Yeah, I mean, ESPN had him at like number 4 on like its preseason list of college football players in the country. Like that, he was considered coming into this maybe like the best defensive player in the whole country this season. We haven't seen that yet by any means. And there's these moments, like you said, when he sacked KJ, and he actually leads LSU in sacks and tackles for loss right now. Like, he has had a presence, but it just hasn't been like
quiet.
A full game.
He doesn't seem to be playing instinctively, or as instinctively as he was last year.
He's certainly more so since they've moved him to outside backer. But it's maybe still, he is playing a lot more than he did even well, by the end of last season, he was playing pretty much an entire game, but this is still kind of the first time throughout an entire season that he's playing like every single snap throughout an entire game. And it's, so he's flashing in moments, but it just hasn't been like, he has not taken over a game.
Right.
And he hasn't sort of made his presence felt like play in and play out over a course of a game. We're still kind of waiting to see that. Something that's been kind of interesting, they haven't used him as a spy, like really much at all. They did a few plays in the Florida State game, and Florida State was able to neutralize him in that way. That was really effective in that way against Ole Miss last year when he played as a spy on Jackson Dart. That was part of his kind of coming out party in a way. And so I'm curious to see if they do that this weekend or if they try to toy with that at all.
Certainly something to look for, and it would make sense, just as you said, because Jackson Dart is a running quarterback. You want to be able to sort of neutralize that threat if you can. Let's discuss LSU's defensive line. We can get to all parts of the LSU defense if we need to, because there are all areas of concern and question. But I think it would be safe to say that LSU has proven to be deeper on the defensive line, certainly than they were last year. And part of that has to do, I'm sure it's much to the relief of Mekhi Wingo, who, as we've discussed over and over and over again, played more snaps than any other defensive tackle in the country last season. But, Mason Smith did not have a great game, at least to the untrained eye. It looked like he got pushed around a good bit against Arkansas, which is a little bit of a surprise. But we also have to remember that he's still getting himself into shape. And I think, to be fair to him, he was seeing at least a fair amount of double teams. And I think that sort of manifested itself in some of the plays that Mekhi Wingo and Deshaun Womack, who we will get to, certainly made in this game. If we would, let's start with Deshaun Womack, who flashed a little bit, had a sack on third down, a key third down against Arkansas, freshman from Baltimore, but then also Jordan Jefferson, no relation, the transfer from West Virginia, defensive tackle, who I think has looked really good against the run. Anywhere you want to start there, Wilson?
First off, I think that we've used our one allowance on making that joke.
I'm sorry. It's not supposed to be a joke. It's just, you just have to say it.
Like, Kramer Robinson, his mom's Kim Mulkey, by the way. Like,
yeah.
you have like a certain number of times I think that you're allowed to make the joke. We've used our one, so.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jordan, we'll start with him, has been, they had defensive lined up, like you said, was not good last year. I mean, Mekhi Wingo stepped up in a huge way when Mason went down, and Jaquelin Roy played a ton of football. It was those two, and that was basically it. Jacoby Guillory did not play a ton. And so it was actually kind of funny, like Mekhi Wingo back at the bowl game was talking about how he was excited he wasn't going to have to play 70 to 80 snaps.
Oh, yeah, sure.
He wasn't going to have to. And it drove home to me a few weeks ago we were talking to Mason Smith when he said that like 60 snaps in a game is like a lot for a defensive tackle. It drove home just how much Mekhi was playing.
That's right.
They don't have to have that problem now, because, in large part because of Jordan Jefferson. Jacoby Guillory has gotten better. He's a bigger piece of this rotation as well. And Jordan is a guy who has really flashed. He only had 3 tackles against Arkansas, but it just, especially upon rewatching the game, felt like he was much more disruptive than that.
Yeah.
He had half a tackle for loss as well, but again, it was just like he was causing some havoc in the backfield. It wasn't always finishing plays, and that's kind of the big piece for this defensive front is finishing the play. Because there was even moments with Mekhi, like had a chance to bring down Jordan Jefferson, bull rushed a right tackle straight into him on Arkansas's second drive, and didn't get him to the ground. And so Jordan, though, it's going to be also kind of one of those fascinating defensive things here personnel-wise early on against Ole Miss. Does he overtake Mason Smith in the starting lineup, or does he at least get more playing time? Brian Kelly said that they really liked him as a nose guard in their 3-down techniques, and so I think we'll definitely see that. How much more, we'll kind of have to watch the game unfold. And then with Deshaun Womack, he's somebody who is a 5-star freshman, and he's got a ton of upside. We saw him in the preseason, there was moments when he was getting flattened by LSU's tackles because he was kind of between jack linebacker and defensive end, and just physically, like, this is a talented offensive line, and physically he was maybe not like fully developed yet, like in every way that he needed to be. But that was like over a month ago. He's clearly coming along. He's got a ton of athleticism, and so LSU's gotten him onto the field as a kind of stand-up edge rusher. And he only played 5 snaps against Arkansas. Brian Kelly said that he is not ready to be a starter yet. I think that's fully understandable. Like,
yeah, that's right.
He's a player who's got to be able to set the edge and stop the run. He maybe isn't there yet, but it'll be surprising if he does not get more than 5 snaps.
I thought it said everything. The sack that he got against Arkansas was on a 3rd and 16, so that's a clear sign. Okay, we can trust this guy to rush the passer, and certainly he flashed when he did, and when he's out there on the field.
But back to the Mason Smith. It's time. Okay?
Yes.
He needs to come along. And Jefferson has played well enough that I'm giving him more playing time in the Ole Miss game. Ole Miss has to run the ball to win the game.
That's right.
That is such a big. Everybody talks about Lane Kiffin and the offensive genius, and people think passing, but it's really Ole Miss has to. Their offense is predicated on running the ball, and they've got to get some push and some plays up the middle. And if Smith can't do that, then I've got to make a change. I've got to think LSU needs to make a change, in my opinion.
Well, you have a point there, because Jordan Jefferson on PFF grades, which take maybe with a grain of salt sometimes, but can be instructive, and he graded out so far as LSU's best run defensive lineman. Like when he's been on the field in those situations, and Brian Kelly even said it, that they really thought that him and Jacoby Guillory a few weeks ago were their best run defensive tackles. Like you said, Ole Miss, that offense needs to run the football. And if you can make them one-dimensional, then you have a great chance to win. That's what Alabama did last week. Ole Miss rushed for about 56 or 59 yards.
That's right.
And scored 10 points.
So let's zoom out a little bit and just talk about the defense in general, the LSU defense in general, not so much personnel. They're 11th in the SEC in total defense, and as many a coach who's come through here has said, when LSU's not playing great defense, nobody in Baton Rouge is in a good mood. They're facing an Ole Miss team that has not, and you're right, Lane Kiffin's offense is predicated on you establish the run first, and then they go have fun, right? But Quinshon Judkins, their preseason All-SEC running back, is averaging about 50.2 yards or something right around in there.
3.5 yards per carry.
Yeah, per game. No, they have not established the run for whatever reason. Long story short, can they get it? Can the LSU defensive front, the front 7, get it done against an Ole Miss offense that is frankly struggling, certainly on the ground? But then also just, can LSU's problems on defense be fixed as we go down the road this season?
It's the old saying, you can't call up somebody from the minors or make a trade or something like that. You have who you have. And LSU's got some very good players. We've mentioned a lot of them. Perkins is a very good player, and Smith and Wingo was an All-American last year, and you've got guys coming on like Weeks and Womack and Braden Swenson, who we haven't mentioned. They play well in flashes. They had a good. They helped LSU change the momentum against Arkansas to where the offense, who started off very slowly, finally got going, and they scored their last 6 possessions of the game. But sustaining it for a whole game has not been something they've been able to do in any game, even the Grambling game, right? I mean, Grambling rolled up a lot of yards on LSU to start the game, even though they only scored 10 points.
Particularly Mississippi State, they had a pretty full game there.
They sure did.
But Mississippi State's offense is
in flux.
Yeah.
Yes.
But their first touchdown, Mississippi State scored. The guy missed a tackle. Somebody missed a tackle on the outside, and their running back got away for a long run to set up their first touchdown. Big plays are going to happen. It's modern college football. I just think this LSU defense, they can be better than 11th, but are they better than middle of the pack? I don't know. And you have an elite offense.
Middle of the pack might be enough,
well,
if the offense still rolls.
You've got to figure the offense is going to score points, but they're going to have to score points. I don't think LSU is going to hold Ole Miss to 10 points, especially in Oxford.
That's right.
Ole Miss went on the road last week at Alabama and only scored 10. So it's a defense that can be better than it is, and I think has a very good chance to improve, but it's only going to improve to a certain point. I just don't think you see a dominant defense there. And if anything keeps LSU out of winning the SEC West or the SEC or fighting for a college football playoff spot, that's what it's going to be.
One area where they particularly need to improve, just as a quick point, is on third down. They are
99th
for the second year in a row. They're struggling.
Second in the country in third down percentage. That was something that Matt House circled in the preseason as an area where they were going to have to improve. It was that and takeaways.
It's almost like you want to get them LSU in 3rd and long. It's almost like the other team is like, yeah, it's 3rd and 8. All right, we're in good shape.
That's what's so bizarre about it is it isn't 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. It is 3rd and 6, 3rd and 9. 3rd and 10 at times. There was a third down on Arkansas' second drive, the one where they ended up scoring a field goal because LSU, to its credit, in the red zone buckled down a few times in that game. It was crucial that they did. But 3rd down and 10, there was the play I referenced earlier where Mekhi Wingo bull rushes the right tackle into KJ Jefferson, but maybe it was the rush lanes were off in front of him and with some of the other guys, got too far upfield, middle of the field open. There's one guy in space, him and Andre Sam. He jukes Andre Sam, picks up 25 yards. And it's a matter of on the defensive line finishing when you are getting pressure, because that is, if there's a strength of this defense, it is on the defensive line.
Agreed.
Those guys can sort of take that next little step and finish on plays when they're getting pressure, because there's been pressure, then they can start to really make things happen. That's what we saw against Mississippi State. You take, you help out your secondary in that case, and that's going to be big on 3rd down because. Yeah, it was 9 of 14 for Florida State on 3rd down, 8 of 13 for Arkansas on 3rd down, and like we said, it was not just 3rd and 2 most of the time.
And just to put a finer point on what you're saying, to me, and Brian Kelly referenced this on Monday when he was speaking to us, to me, it's 2 major things. One, play your assignment, right? DC said that, and I'm paraphrasing because he didn't use this term, but don't play hero ball. Almost like a throwback to when offenses were playing option football. And the defensive end is trying to take the quarterback and the pitch man. That's why you find yourself in trouble. Don't try to come up and help on the run if your assignment is to cover somebody on the back end. Play assignment football, and as you said, tackle. We have seen a ton of missed tackles, and it's a little bit more difficult. I mean, we've mentioned this before. For those who maybe don't know about how sort of modern college football works, is that there's not a whole lot of tackling to the ground in practice anymore. Matter of fact, Mason Smith a couple of weeks ago requested it because they'd been missing so many tackles in practice. Hey, we want to go live in practice, right? So to me, hit your assignments and tackle. We will move on to the offense here, but again, you're listening to and experiencing the LSU Sports Insider podcast. If you like what you hear and you know where to find all our writers' great work, that's at theadvocate.com. Please subscribe if you would. It's theadvocate.com/subscribe to go there and sign up. You can get a digital subscription, a print subscription, whatever you fancy. That's theadvocate.com/subscribe, and sign up for our newsletter. That's theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. Theadvocate.com/LSU NOLA.com/LSU newsletter. So speaking of good news, how about the offense? Let's talk about them. We've talked about the defense for a good bit, and with good reason. That's the area, obviously, of most concern. But there's also some good news, and specifically as it relates to, I think, the ground game, LSU's ground game. Logan Diggs over the past 2 weeks has absolutely established the ground game. I thought it was very, very important and meaningful, specifically at the time they got that ground game going against Arkansas. They had run the ball with their running backs. Jaden Daniels, obviously, on design runs and scrambles had done his damage, but they were deep into the third quarter. They had Josh Williams had 1 carry, John Emery had 2 carries, and Logan Diggs had 2 carries. It was a total of 5 carries for the running backs, about 40 minutes into a 60-minute game. Logan Diggs certainly took up the slack from there, ran for more than 97 yards, is that right? Yeah. 97 yards, and really got the offense established on the ground. And he did very similar against Grambling and Mississippi State. I think he's emerged, I think everybody would say, as the lead back, maybe with Josh Williams as a 1A or a good third down back. So the pass offense obviously looks great. Brian Thomas, certainly made his mark against Arkansas and needed to. Somebody needed to step up because Malik Neighbors, as you would suspect, was getting so much attention from the Arkansas secondary. Ole Miss is 10th in the SEC in total defense, a lot like LSU. They're struggling in a lot of ways. And I think it's noteworthy that they're 10th in the SEC in defense because they played Mercer and gave up 7 points against Mercer. Georgia Tech scored a decent amount on them and moved the ball decently on them. And Georgia Tech is a program in transition with Perryn Keys in his first year as a coach. So long story short, is there any reason to think that LSU's offense is going to slow down up in Oxford? And if so, what would be the thing that slows it down?
I don't think it's going to slow down. Of course, the thing that would slow it down is if Jaden Daniels is off, like he was early in the Arkansas game. Jaden, what was a major sign of improvement with him as well was that he was able to get it back. We didn't see him when he was having a bad game last year be able to then go and find it mid-game. He did, and the offense took off. But if we see another sign of inconsistency, and he's now struggling over the course of an entire game, that could be problematic. Like you said, Ole Miss is right behind LSU in terms of points scored per game right now. They're at 42. LSU's like 42.8. And even though Alabama was able to shut them down, they have shown a propensity to be able to score. And so LSU is going to need to be able to match and keep up ahead of Ole Miss on the offensive side. And so Jaden is obviously a huge part of that. Everything goes through him offensively. And so that would be the thing I think that is really on them. I don't know what Ole Miss would do necessarily to take things away. If they were able to get a lot of pressure, that would disrupt things, of course, but I think it's a matter of Jaden being consistent and on his A game. And like you said, though, because especially offensively, they are much more well-rounded than they were in week 1. Brian Thomas has come on as a clear number 2 receiver, somebody who is not just, he was like a bona fide number 2 in the SEC. Last year he had around 360 yards over the last 2 seasons. He's already over 430 at this point through 4 games. He's got 5 touchdowns, and the way him and Malik Neighbors complement each other is really good. And then with the emergence of Logan Diggs, who Brian Kelly keeps saying, we're just going to ride the hot hand, and it's still going to be a rotation. And to a degree, yes, there is going to be a bit of a rotation. Frank Wilson likes to get those guys in and out, but Logan Diggs is, for all intents and purposes, the RB1 right now. So.
Go ahead, Rab. I'm sorry.
They've got multiple ways to attack you. And as you alluded to, Perryn, yes, we're gonna try to do this to Malik Neighbors, and now Brian Thomas. They both had over 100 yards receiving against Arkansas. That's tough to stop. Mason Taylor didn't play against Mississippi State. Come back, didn't look 100%, but the offense is a big part of the tight end is a big part of this offense, and he should get better. And then you have Diggs leading the running game, and Jaden, of course, is a dual threat quarterback. There's a lot of ways LSU can take it. There got to be some defensive coaches sleeping on their couches in Oxford. This week it's like, what are we going to do? These guys, they do this, they do that. They have an elite offense. They're ranked in the top 10 in the country. And Jaden Daniels, if I may say about Jaden Daniels. He's ranked in the top 8 in the country, and he leads the SEC in yards per game passing and touchdowns and total offense, and he's way up there in passing efficiency. A lot of people, you get a sense they're still not on the Jaden Daniels bandwagon. This guy is he Joe Burrow? Okay, maybe not, But that's a
Nobody's Joe Burrow.
Nobody's ever going to be.
Nobody's going to be Joe Burrow.
He's excellent. He's the All-SEC quarterback right now.
Well, it's easy. Sure. It's easy to forget this because they sort of fell flat against Florida State and Orlando. Jaden Daniels coming to this season. You saw this before everybody else did. Rav, Jaden Daniels getting the second shortest odds in Heisman race. So I mean, it tells you all you need to know. Had they had just a little bit better performance, I wonder if he wouldn't still be sort of lurking right around that top 5, top 8 in the Heisman race. Yeah, he's. It would take a lot for him to get back into that race, and that's kind of a separate conversation. But no, the offense. Speaking of the offense, all these playmakers, I think it's worth noting that the offensive line certainly has to get a large share of the credit here because. It looked like this season was going to be a work in progress yet again. I'm speaking only for myself, and I'm obviously quite literally an armchair analyst here, but I thought Miles Frazier had a really good game at right guard against Arkansas, and I think it said everything that you didn't see the sort of rotating in that they had experimented with against Arkansas, where they had taken Zalance Hurd, put him in at right tackle, taken Emory Jones and moved him into right guard, which incidentally, that's sort of his. I think everybody agrees that would have been his more natural position, if all things were equal. Rab, just give me sort of your 2 cents on where the offensive line is and how they look now compared to how they looked at the start of the season.
Good. I mean, I think that, like you said, they've kind of got things a little solidified, and it's like this is our group, and Hurd is a player, that's going to continue to get better. But again, against Arkansas, the whole offense started kind of slow. I mean, they didn't score in the first quarter, and then they that breathtaking drive right before halftime, 3 plays, boom, they scored, and then they started to push Arkansas back. You started to get a real push where they started to control the line of scrimmage, which Arkansas was doing early in the game. So LSU's got to be able to impose their will with the offensive line of the other team. Football's not that hard a game. It's still not that hard with all the fancy bells and whistles. You still got to control the line of scrimmage. And we talked about the defensive line. They've got to do a good job of the offensive line too, and protecting Jaden to give him time to throw. Like any quarterback, if he's hurried, if he's got somebody in his face, it's going to throw off the passing game. But if you give him time, he's going to find one of these talented receivers. So it certainly starts with the offensive line, and I think they're starting to look like. I started to see as the game went on against Arkansas the strength that they're supposed to be going into the season.
They were struggling early up front with some of the things Arkansas was doing on the defensive front. Arkansas had 2 sacks in the first half, and that seemed to be one of the things that was affecting Jaden's timing and his rhythm. He's somebody who works from the ground up. Everything starts with his footwork in terms of his ability as a passer, and that just looked hurried throughout the beginning of the Arkansas game. Right on LSU's first play, Arkansas got pressure, and since after that, it was sort of just seemed like that's maybe part of why it took a quarter and a half to kind of find it. And so after halftime, Arkansas didn't have a sack.
That's right. Yeah.
Maybe again, it's all working together. There's times when Jaden's holding onto the ball and it's not always on the offensive line and things like that. But it was all just like in sync. And the offensive line was doing, like you said, much better, picking up those pressures and then applying its will in the run game. It is fascinating that Zalance Hurd did not play right tackle in this game after he rotated a ton against Grambling, less against Mississippi State, and then did not against Arkansas. That'll be something else to try to ask Brian Kelly about and find out is what they kind of have the plan for him being moving forward, because he is someone who long term they have so much belief in.
And should. He looks the part, right?
6'6", 340 with super long arms, and I mean he's confident, he's physical, he's going to be a great player, but maybe not right this second. LSU has the luxury of not being able to have to thrust him in if he's not quite ready yet.
Pretty amazing that Lance Hurd and Will Campbell both grew up together in Monroe. How'd you like to go up against those 2 guys?
Well, yeah, I grew up together certainly in terms of like playing on the same high school team. I will say for Lance, he takes pride in being from Bonita.
Yes,
that is where
that's right.
He's from.
Yeah,
and yeah, I mean they were both at Neville, and having talked to Neville's coaches about that before they were like, man, this is great.
Makes their job just a little bit easier, right? Before we get to before we put both of you on the spot and ask for a prediction for what's going to happen here on Saturday up in Oxford, first things first, what's the number one matchup that LSU has to win to be able to leave Oxford with a W? Rab, go ahead.
Number one matchup, I would say it's defensive line disrupting Jackson Dart. He's another quarterback, maybe not quite like Jaden, but he can move. He's got mobility. He can
leads the SEC He has rushed for more yards than Jaden to this point.
Yeah, and maybe that's good. Maybe that's a good thing for LSU in a way that he's not. He wasn't the leading rusher last week against Arkansas, but they gotta disrupt him and get him out of rhythm and get him out of sync, and certainly can't let Quinshon Judkins go off. He's struggled, as we said, to this point in the season. You don't want this to be his coming out party where he has 125 yards. So that's going to be bad for LSU. So I think, again, controlling that Ole Miss ground game is going to be job one.
I was going to say, I think we're maybe in the same camp then in terms of where we see this game coming down to, because I still think it's going to be a pretty high-scoring game.
Yeah.
I agree.
I agree. But you got to be able to make a few stops in crucial moments. And so for me, that is, stopping the run, because that's what we saw the recipe was for our Alabama last week.
That's right.
If you can make Ole Miss one-dimensional, then Jackson Dart is, while he's been better this year than last year, I don't think he's somebody who is, maybe you can get him into a turnover or something like that if you make them one-dimensional and stop the ground game, because is LSU going to hold them to 59 yards or 1.9 yards a carry?
Probably not.
But they can still, if they can kind of follow that formula in some way, then I think that they end up coming out of there with a win if they're able to do that and make enough stops, get off the field a little bit more on third down in particular, to give their offense a little bit of breathing room. Then I like LSU's chances to win a pretty high-scoring game.
I'm going to cheat a little bit and just say the LSU front seven. And the reason I say front seven is not only the defensive line getting pressure, which is going to be crucial for helping out the LSU secondary throughout the season, but specifically the front seven, specifically the linebackers. We saw Arkansas just absolutely feast on LSU, particularly in the first half on run-pass options. Fake it to the running back or stick it in his belly and decide to pull it out, and then that sucked in LSU's linebackers. And how many times did you see the tight end or a wide receiver just kill them on cross routes? So maintain the discipline and assignments. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that could, I don't want to lead us on fun to a super long other discussion about the secondary, but something that we've noticed this season is LSU's playing a lot of zone coverage.
Yeah.
They played zone a good bit last year too, but they're playing cover 4 much more this season. LSU played cover 4 about 20% of the time last year. That's up to over 30 now, and it is maybe as a result of that zone coverage is giving teams cushion on those long in-breaking routes. We saw it against Grambling too. We definitely saw it against Arkansas. And so if LSU kind of needs to tighten up that zone coverage a little bit, because if they are doing those run-pass options and you're pulling the linebackers towards the line of scrimmage because they have to think about stopping the run, that's a big chunk of the field for you. And so, this is a copycat game. Arkansas had a lot of success doing that.
That's right.
We need to make sure that doesn't get replicated again.
That's exactly right. I wouldn't surprise me they're playing cover 4. Maybe they're thinking, look, we don't have a shutdown defense, so let's make them go. Let's make an opposing offense go all the way down the field. Maybe somewhere along the way they get behind the chains, they commit a penalty. Make them earn it, so to speak. Now, of course, the key to that is you got to tackle if you're going to keep everything in front of you. So, you mentioned you thought it was going to be a high-scoring game, Wilson. The line, the over/under opened at 62.5. It has moved to 67.5. So that would speak to people thinking that you're probably going to see more than just a few points up at Vaught Hemingway Stadium. I will put this to you. I'm not asking for an over/under prediction, although I'm going to guess you take the over. But look, LSU opened as a 1.5-point favorite. They're a 2.5-point favorite now. What happens in Oxford?
So my prediction is up on the site. I had LSU 42, Ole Miss 38. So I guess I took the over, which.
He went over like Mondo Duplantis over.
Way over. Yeah.
I do. These are two, like you said, defenses that have areas that can be exploited. Ole Miss and LSU have really two high-scoring offenses to this point, and I think that's kind of what you end up seeing happening. But like I said, I just feel like LSU is going to make a play or two on the defensive side to get themselves off the field or maybe force a field goal to provide just that little bit of separation. And I like the offense's ability to go up there and score some points.
Rab?
I
have a little contrarian streak in me, so I'm going to take the under. But still a lot of points. LSU 34-27. I think Ole Miss, again, go to the ground game. They have got to shorten the game against LSU. You can't let LSU have 75, 80 plays in this game, because if I'm Lane Kiffin, I'm thinking we're not going to stop these guys. They're going to score 42 points.
Well, which is interesting because, LSU, Ole Miss used to play tempo. And, Lane Kiffin certainly used to play tempo.
Remember that game with Alabama a couple years ago?
Up and down the field.
Up and down the field.
And Ole Miss is averaging, now I grant you, I understand that there's a change in the rules with the first down clock running and stuff like that, but Ole Miss is averaging something like 62 plays per game this year, whereas they were into the 70s last year. So yeah, if I'm sorry to cut you off, Rabbit. If I'm them, I'm trying to keep the ball, right?
Yeah. So got to run, got to establish run, got to stick with it, and try to shorten that game and score points. But they're not going to be able to. They don't want to get into a track meet with LSU. But I think LSU prevails by a touchdown, maybe a little more. But I think they cover. But not the under, not the over. They go with the under.
And for those wondering, we do have one of our colleagues picked Ole Miss to win the game. So it's not like we're just going to have like LSU across the board like it is on game day and look embarrassed. We have somebody who picked Ole Miss to win this game. So
this is shaped up to be one of LSU's biggest tests of the year. I mean,
it absolutely is.
Season, and even though Ole Miss lost last week, it still is. And you got this. This tough back-to-back stretch going to Ole Miss, and Missouri looks like a much tougher game than it did, before the season. But if they can get through this, they're not going to lose before they, going to the Alabama game.
That's a bold statement. But to your point though, this is maybe that much more important. Ole Miss, and we'll wrap it up, with this. But Ole Miss, we've discussed, and Sheldon Mickles, our colleague, has a story up on theadvocate.com right now about how the SEC West specifically, seems very wide open. LSU and Alabama were the two favorites going into the season, suffered some kind of ugly losses early on. Texas A&M suffered a loss early on in Miami. Didn't look like they could stop Miami if they absolutely had to, and they didn't. And so it looked like a division that was wide open, maybe there for the taking for Ole Miss. Now they lose to Alabama. They've got no room for error. That makes you think that much more that they're really going to give you their best shot if you're LSU going up there. So we shall see, of course, and we'll have all our coverage of LSU at Ole Miss. On Saturday, it's a 5 o'clock kickoff. That's right. It's a weird kickoff. I don't know why exactly that is, but it's 5 o'clock on ESPN Saturday at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. That's where we'll wrap it up. We'll be here throughout football season and beyond. You know what to do for everything Louisiana college football. You go to theadvocate.com. If you want to subscribe, go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. That's theadvocate.com/subscribe. Also, if you want to sign up for our newsletter, Rab handles that personally 3 times a week, but it's a daily newsletter. And so please support your local journalist. Sign up for the LSU newsletter. That's theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. Again, that's theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. For Wilson Alexander, Scott Rabalais, I'm Perryn Keys. I'm the executive sports editor, along with Wilson and Rab. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.